Well, last year, in a landmark move, the Parliament passed the Maternity Benefit Amendment Bill. Now, the bill entitles women to a maternity leave of 26 weeks for up to 2 children. Earlier, the limit stood at 12 weeks. That's not all. The bill gives adoptive mothers with a baby younger than 3 months and surrogate mothers 12 weeks of leave. But even as the bill is seen as a giant step when it comes to boosting workplace equality, its fallout in the short term cannot be ignored. According to a survey by TeamLease Services, an estimated 11 to 18 lakh women will lose their jobs across 10 sectors in the financial year to March 2019 because of the law. The survey, conducted among 300 employers across sectors like aviation, information technology, IT-enabled services, real estate, education, manufacturing, highlight that while large and professionally managed companies will back the landmark reform, small and medium-sized companies would resist hiring women as they find the cost prohibitive. So joining us now to discuss the way forward, co-founder of TeamLease, Rituparna Chakrabarti, Shobhana Kamineni of Apollo Hospitals, and Asian Development Bank's economist Mithali Nikore. Welcome to the show, ladies. Rituparna, let me start by asking you, because your report basically says the job losses are estimated for FY 18-19 to the tune of 11 to 18 lakhs across 10 sectors. And this job loss, you're saying, is solely attributable to the new bill. Can you explain to us the process of collecting this data and how you have arrived at these numbers? Because if you extrapolate this number, then for across all sectors, the number comes to about 1 to 1.2 crores.
Hi, Shireen. So, yeah, I think when a year back this bill was brought into, was amended and came into play, personally, I was really, I was actually extremely positive about the bill because I felt that any mother after having a child, usually we don't see them coming back to work within 3 months, and it does get extended to 6 months. And from that perspective, if one looks at it, the intent seemed right. But over the last 1 year, I've been getting mixed signals talking to different corporates and especially in the HR fraternity. And hence we said, why don't we conduct a study to try and understand what's really going on? So we reached out to about 300 organizations across 10 sectors, couldn't do more than 10 because of paucity of time. But these are the high impact segments. And we tried to understand what really is going on. And the surprising part is that out of the 10 sectors, 3 sectors, which is BPO, ITS, IT, and e-commerce, were really positive about the impact of this bill. They felt that the diversity equation within the organization is set to improve. They also believe that the post-maternity attrition is likely to go down. However, sectors like retail, manufacturing, aviation, education, all of them seem to believe that in the short run there is likely to be a reduction in hiring of women employees on account of the changes that have been made. And that's pretty much translates into an impact of 11 to 18 lakhs across the 10 sector. I think it's, I would say it's an issue of certain organizations in certain pockets being impacted definitely by cost, but also taking a myopic view of the situation. For example, which are these organizations who largely are feeling the pinch? Most of the SME segments, small, medium sector organizations are definitely feeling the pinch, and it's a cost pinch. The startup ecosystem unilaterally seem to be affected by it. Large organizations, however, family-owned and privately held, seem to have the same view. So essentially, but yes, there are large professionally managed organizations who are very upbeat about it. So cost definitely is an issue, but I think it's also about their inability to put together all the attributes and all the indirect investments, or rather the indirect cost at play by not hiring women at workplace. Which I think the maths, of course,
I understand that.
Maybe, I mean, from their perspective, we should survive.
Yeah, I understand that the math eventually, maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, will fall into place. But in the short term, especially as far as SMEs or startups are concerned, the cost is proving to be prohibitive. Shobna Kamineni, I remember the day that this bill was passed and we did a panel like this and you were on it and you had expressed your reservations. You were very clear even then that this would actually act as a deterrent, not as an enabler to women's participation in the workforce. Now, the fact of the matter is that something needs to be done. Has this gone too far? Do we need to pull back? Is 100% employer-funded model the way forward for an economy like India? Can there be other solutions that we can find? The fact of the matter is that women's participation in the workforce has been declining steadily. It's currently at about 27%. Something needs to be done.
Shireen, you know, I think that it's important that you have an all-woman panel, and we're probably here to market this bill as much as, you know, to discuss the pros and cons, because fundamentally I think that any initiative which is pro-women has to be supported by us women here. Having said that, it's important that also that we do wear another hat, which is running organizations and having to run them profitably. So I like the way that you said, should it be only employer funded? I think that there are models that should evolve, especially that I think that the government should start participating in encouraging, you know, and giving subsidies for creches, especially in the SMEs. Because these are the sectors, and I think that, you know, what Ritu was talking, you know, from TeamLease, the study that they did, there are sectors like ours, for instance, healthcare, IT, where women are essential, and whatever we're looking at is a short-term, maybe no hire for women, till they think it through and understand that the benefits of this, the long-term benefits, because what is it? A child is maybe a one event, two event in a lifetime, in a woman's lifetime. And I think this, we should all participate in it's part of nation building. So fundamentally, the law is good, but it needs to be augmented. That's the thing, you know, we have to augment it, because you can't expect people who are looking and responsible to shareholders to really just support this without any reservation. So fundamentally, good move, but it needs to be backed.
Well, let me go across to Mithali now. Mithali, you know, I go back again to the conversation that we had the day that this bill was passed, and a lot of the people on our panel suggested that by you know, making this about women, we were actually going to take away from people wanting to hire them. So bring in the concept of family leave, which is now being sort of given out in a lot of countries globally as well. You've written about some of these ideas and solutions in your blog in response to the fact that in year one, we've seen actually what TeamLease is suggesting, a decline, a further decline in the participation of women in the workforce on account specifically of the maternity bill.
Absolutely, Shirin. I mean, if we look at the entire concept which is being forwarded by the maternity bill at this point, it is about trying to, you know, incentivize women to stay back in the workforce. But because of that, we're having this unintended consequence of increasing the cost of hiring a woman and then deterring them altogether. So my recommendation here was to just simply drop the distinction between maternal and paternal leave. Have parental leave. Let that be shared between the two parents the way they want. And, you know, have a compensation formula which ensures that there is parity between the male and the female. So if you're, you know, if you have a family scenario where you have two parents, let the companies of both the parents bear the cost. You know, why should it only be the employer of the woman who is bearing the cost of the maternity leave?
Rituparna, you know, let's talk about the way forward now. This is a legislation. So, if changes have to be made, they will have to be made by way of amendments. But what do you imagine could be the practical solutions? Or can there really be practical solutions, the kind that Mithali just made on air, without actually changing the law?
So I think that is definitely a practical solution. However, I'd also like to bring your attention in terms of why the 6 months finally was arrived at and what was the basis of this legislation. Essentially, United Nations have come up with a serious recommendation that it's important for mother to actually breastfeed their child for a period of 6 months. That's actually towards the well-being of the child going forward. I think that was the fundamental basis of coming up with that figure of 6 months. So I think one of the things which the government should right now look at is that this is essentially a short-term problem, and hence if there is a possibility, one should seriously consider a financial amnesty scheme for organizations and especially the SME sector, so that they don't treat this as a deterrent.
No, but Ritu, why would you say it's a short-term problem? I mean, if the cost is for an SME or a startup, it will continue to be so in future as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, I agree. So I think I'm not going to define the short term for you right now, but you know, the way I look at it, that I think the SMEs also, at this point of time, I do believe that it's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, because like Shobna was mentioning, an employee, a woman employee who's likely to give you 25 years of service, 6 months stint is honestly, from an expense perspective, is not that prohibitive even for the startups or the SME segments, because the cost of trying to rehire people after 6 months or after there is an attrition is actually quite high. I mean, we did that estimate and it's there in the study. It's as much as 85 to 130% of the annual salary, which is not really a joke even for an SME segment. So that's why I'm not probably going to try and define the short term. Maybe short term could be more than a year, but I think we do need something in the immediate future to kind of tide through this particular problem. Also, we have to look at role models in the form of some of these large organizations. They need to actively come forward and talk about their diversity success stories to kind of change the drift. Because it's a little bit of a panic situation without really playing through the numbers in many cases, in many situations.
Okay, so you believe that there is a little bit of panic on account of the math not being worked out at this point in terms of the long-term benefits. But Mitali, again, in the short term, as Rituparna pointed out, there need to be interim solutions that we will need to find within the ambit of the law. You know, you gave us one creative idea. What could be some of the others?
So I think, Shireen, the simple thing is, you know, when we're talking about this, you know, long-term, short-term, I mean, I think the important thing is to look at the immediate term. You know, the idea should be that men are as involved in parenting and in childcare as the women. So if you're saying that there has to be a creche within 50 meters of my office, then men should also be allowed to visit that creche. So, you know, these are the kind of ideas, and have days, you know, within organizations where you're bringing your child to the workplace.
Okay, so you're basically going back to the point that
because of breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding, but essentially saying that the responsibility as well as the cost should not be limited to the woman alone, and organizations will have to find a way. Shobna Kamineni, I'll give you the final say on this before we close.
Yeah, so Shireen, I think that we have to, it's our fundamental responsibility to make sure that this moves forward. Let's look at it as, you know, like Ritu and I were saying, it's maybe twice in a lifetime event, and the entire you know, working period of a woman. And I think that the government has to chip in terms of supporting creches. I like the idea of paternal, you know, that the companies, you know, paternal co-pay from those companies, so it equalizes it. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, what are we solving for? We're actually putting more stress on the formal sector, when we have to really help the informal sector also. This is, you know, the idea here is to, you know, from every report about women's participation. So we have to make it we have to make it more positive, that we continue to get women working, and also that we push down these good benefits. That again, it should not be just in the formal sector. Find ways, and that's where the government should start concentrating on.
Sure.
They don't leave this out. So I think that this should not be an exceptional kind of rule as it looks like now.
Absolutely. Absolutely, this is something that we need to take forward, and as Rituparna was mentioning, and I can vouch for that, the fact of the matter is that if you manage to retain talent and they continue to stay on after their maternity leave is over, the math, as well as from a perspective of being able to keep your talent with you, is really in the interest of the organization. So I hope that more companies will work towards finding more creative solutions, and I also hope the government will chip in and try and shoulder some of the responsibility. Rituparna, Shobna and Mitali, appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 special discussion.